"You're warm," she whispered. "You feel like safety." Kyle blinked, caught off guard by the strange softness in her voice. He looked down at the silver-skinned woman cradled in his arms, her large, dark eyes staring up at him with a mix of confusion and something else, something almost vulnerable. "I'm just a guy with a good grip and a generator," he said, trying to keep it light, but she didn't laugh. She didn't even smile. She just kept staring at him, blinking slowly like she was processing 1,000 things at once. Jara wasn't supposed to be here. Not like this. Her species, the Erickson, were highly advanced, cold, logical. Touch was rare. Emotions were studied, not expressed. But she had come to this planet, Y-27, to observe humans in the field, quietly, from a distance. Then the storm hit. Her shuttle was pulled down by the electromagnetic interference in the atmosphere. A crash, fire, smoke, and then him. A human. Dr. Cale Mercer, geologist, earthborn, beard that looked like it hadn't met a razor in weeks, and a body that definitely had. He found her half-conscious, pinned beneath the cracked fuselage, with smoke choking the air and acid rain starting to fall. He didn't ask questions. He just hauled her out like she was nothing but luggage, tore off his coat and ran her back to his station before the acid rain could melt through her strange, thin skin. Now she was here, wrapped in a thermal blanket, glowing faintly from the heat, literally glowing. Erickson bodies did that, bioluminescent signals, normally subtle. Hers were not. It looked like she had swallowed a handful of fireflies. Cale noticed. Hard not to. "So, he said, crouching beside her. "You always light up when you're cold, or is that just a me thing?" She tilted her head, clearly trying to decide if that was a genuine question or a strange human joke. "Then," she answered, voice still shaky but curious, "our bodies emit signals. Heat triggers certain responses." Kyle raised an eyebrow. "Is glowing one of them?" She hesitated. "Only when we're feeling stimulated." He blinked. "Oh." Silence stretched between them. Somewhere in the corner, a kettle began to whistle. Kyle stood quickly, needing something to do. He poured water into 2 mugs, hands moving automatically while his brain tried not to focus on the half-naked alien, glowing like a sensual lava lamp on his cot. She watched him carefully, eyes sharp now. "You saved me," she said. Cale glanced, over his shoulder. "Yeah, well, seemed like the thing to do. You weren't exactly going to walk yourself out of that wreck." "I was told humans were dangerous, primal, aggressive." "Guilty," Cale muttered, handing her a steaming mug. "But we also make excellent coffee." She took it, sniffed it cautiously, then wrinkled her nose. "It smells like burnt plants." "That's not inaccurate." She sipped, she gagged. "Why would you consume this?" Cale laughed. A real laugh. The first in weeks. "Because it keeps us from killing each other before noon." Jara set the mug aside, her body still glowing, though softer. "Now, you carried me, you held me. I didn't think you'd want to be left in a flaming shuttle." She shook her head. "No, you touched me. You held me close. No gloves, no tools, just arms." Cale frowned. "That's what people do when they care." "Humans care so easily?" she asked, like it was a strange thing. He sat down beside her, watching the rain streak across the window. "We don't live long, so yeah. We care fast, we love hard. Sometimes stupidly." Jara stared at him again. He was used to stares, from data techs, board students, the occasional visiting officer. But this one felt different. It wasn't scientific, it wasn't judgmental, it was curious. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You are not what I expected." Kyle gave her a tired smile. "You're not either. I figured aliens would be taller." She blinked. "I'm 6'1". I meant emotionally. For the first time, she smiled, a soft curl of her lips. The glow pulsed once, warm and golden, across her collarbone. She looked down at her chest, then back up at him. "This is not normal." "What part?" he asked. "The crash? The glowing, or the half-naked scientist trying not to stare?" She tilted her head. "You are staring." Kyle grinned, unashamed. "I could lie and say it's for scientific reasons." "I think I'm the one doing the science," she said softly. His heart skipped. Just once. Then again. She wasn't flirting. Not the way humans did. But something in the air had shifted. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Inside, something new was beginning. Neither of them knew what it was, but neither of them wanted to stop it. Kyle didn't sleep much that night. He lay on the other cot across the room, staring at the cracked ceiling of the research shelter while the rain tapped rhythmically on the dome above. Every few minutes, he glanced over at Jara. She hadn't moved. She was still wrapped in the thermal blanket curled on her side, silver skin reflecting soft glimmers from the emergency lighting. Her breathing was steady, her glowing chest rising and falling gently like a heartbeat made of light. Kyle couldn't stop thinking about that moment earlier, the way she'd stared at him like he was some kind of paradox, a puzzle, not dangerous, not primitive, just warm. He wasn't used to that. He'd worked on isolated colonies for years, always the outsider, always alone. People respected his brain, maybe even his endurance, but no one had ever looked at him like he mattered. Jara did. She didn't mean to, probably. She was a scientist, too. She was trained to observe, catalog, remain detached. But something had shifted between them in that little moment of heat, of instinct, of touch. Something that didn't fit in any data sheet. The next morning, Kyle brewed more coffee. It was bitter as hell, but he needed the ritual, the caffeine, the normalcy. He didn't expect Jara to drink it again, but to his surprise, she was already awake, standing barefoot on the metal floor, wrapped in the blanket like some kind of shimmering alien ghost. She was staring at the sunrise through the transparent wall. He cleared his throat. "You're up." She turned, eyes clear and curious. "Your planet rotates faster than mine." The light came quickly. Kyle smiled, faintly. "You get used to it." "I don't want to," she said softly. "I don't want to miss anything." He didn't know what to say to that, so he poured her a mug anyway. This time she drank it without flinching. After breakfast, Jara asked if she could explore the surrounding terrain. "Your shuttle's wrecked. You've got no signal. The weather's still unstable," Kyle said, "and you've barely recovered from a concussion." "I am biologically resilient," she replied, head tilted with that same irritatingly graceful calm. Kyle raised an eyebrow. "You passed out from heat shock yesterday." "I adapted," she replied, "and I want to see where I've landed." Kyle stared at her a moment, then grabbed his coat and motioned to the door. "Fine, but stay close. This place might look calm, but it'll try to kill you the second you turn your back." She followed him outside into the wet, steaming air. The storm had passed, but the sky was still heavy with clouds, casting a strange violet hue over the alien grass and jagged stone outcroppings. Steam rose from the warm soil, turning the landscape into a surreal dream. Jara moved like a ghost, barefoot, silent, her strange skin refracting the light in delicate waves. Kale couldn't help watching her. It wasn't just the way she moved, though that was mesmerizing. It was the way she looked at things, with total focus, like everything deserved to be understood. She crouched near a steaming puddle. "This is mineral-rich. There's sulfur in the steam. It's dangerous to breathe without filtration, but your kind does it anyway." Kyle knelt beside her. "Yeah, we do a lot of dumb stuff. It's kind of our thing." She looked at him, expression unreadable. "Maybe that's why you survive more than anyone expects. You are not the most intelligent or the strongest or the fastest. Gee, thanks. But you're stubborn. You keep going, even when the numbers say you shouldn't." He snorted. Now you sound like my old professor. Jara rose, her feet barely making a sound on the ground. Tell me more about your species. Not just the biology, the real things. Why do you laugh even when things are bad? Why do you fall in love so easily? Why do you keep pets? Why do you dance? Kyle blinked. That's a hell of a list. It's important. He scratched the back of his neck. Okay, laughing, that's easy. If we didn't laugh, we'd probably cry all the time. Falling in love, that's a mess. But maybe we do it because it makes the pain worth something. Pets, they love us no matter what. And dancing? He paused, then grinned. Because sometimes your body knows what to say even when your mouth forgets how to speak. Jara just stared at him, her eyes reflecting the gray sky. That is not scientific. Nope, Kale said. But it's true. She looked away, and for a moment he thought the conversation was over. Then she said quietly, I think I would like to learn how to dance. Kale stared. Now? I do not want to forget you. His breath caught. Okay, he said softly, stepping closer. No music, though. I'll improvise. He reached for her hands. She hesitated only a second, then slid her glowing fingers into his calloused palms. The moment they touched, something sparked. Not lightning, not fire, just a deep warmth that settled somewhere between their bodies. They moved slowly, awkwardly, not in time with anything except the sound of their breath and the wind rustling through the grass. Kyle spun her once and she laughed, sharp and surprised and completely genuine. You're glowing again, he said. She didn't stop, and neither did he. Jara didn't stop glowing. Hours later, back inside the research outpost, her skin still shimmered faintly like moonlight on water. Kyle tried not to stare, but failing was becoming a habit around her. She was lying on her stomach across the cot now, head tilted, arms folded beneath her, studying one of his old paper notebooks like it was ancient scripture. You handwrite your ideas? She asked, gently flipping a page. Is that normal? Kyle looked up from where he was running diagnostics on her wrecked shuttle's transmitter. Not really. It's old school. I don't trust voice logs. Too easy to lose in a solar flare. Jara raised an eyebrow. Paper burns easier than data deletes. Sure, he said, smirking. But fire's honest. It tells you when it's coming. She blinked, and Kale realized she might actually be filing that line into some mental data. Bank titled human psychological phrases, flirting or instability. He didn't care. You write like you talk, she murmured, tapping the page. Messy, full of emotion, but there's depth in it. Kale rolled his chair back with a groan and stretched, his shoulders cracking like gravel. Well, I write better than I talk, unless I'm talking to aliens with radioactive cheekbones. She blinked. What is a cheekbone? Kale stood and walked over to her. Slowly, deliberately, he reached out and ran a finger along the elegant curve of her face. Her skin was warm now, soft like silk wrapped in static. That's a cheekbone, he murmured. She stared at him, eyes wide, not pulling away, not glowing brighter, just breathing very still. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than usual. That's the second time you've touched me without permission. Kale's hand hovered. I can stop. A beat passed. Then she whispered, I didn't ask you to. Silence settled between them, thick and humming. Kyle's heart thudded against his ribs. For the first time, he noticed the small pulses in her throat. Not quite like a human's pulse. Faster. Finer. Like her entire body was one big, beautiful, complicated sensor array trying to process what this meant. Then the transmitter sparked behind him. He cursed and rushed back to the bench. Great, now you've got me distracted. I wasn't trying to, she said, sliding off the cot and walking over to the device. But I am learning. Humans respond to physical cues and proximity. Kyle looked up. She was closer than he realized. Inches away, He could smell her, clean, metallic, faintly sweet like starlight and warm stone. "You're doing a hell of a job, Glowbug." Her mouth twitched. "Is that a compliment or a mating signal?" Kyle laughed so hard he nearly dropped his soldering tool. "Well, I was trying to fix your radio, but now I'm just picturing the first Erickson pickup line." She tilted her head, curious. "Pickup? It's a human thing when you say something cheesy or clever to make someone like you." "I already like you," she said, completely serious. He blinked. "Oh." A silence followed. That felt electric. Then a sharp beeping cut through the moment. The transmitter. Jara leaned in. "That's not my ship." Kale checked the screen. "It's a new signal, orbiting, not crashing, and it's not from my side of the fence either." Jara's glow dimmed. "Then they found me." Kyle frowned. "Who's they?" "My extraction team," she said flatly. "They were meant to come if I failed to report in within 3 cycles." Kyle looked at the clock. "You missed your report by 4. Jara's eyes narrowed. "Then they're early, which means they're suspicious, which means they'll be armed." Kale stood. "Do they know you made contact?" She hesitated. "They will if I answer the signal." He crossed his arms. "Do you want to?" Jara didn't answer. Instead, she sat back on the edge of the table, hands clenched in her lap. "I wasn't supposed to interact," she said quietly. "I was only meant to observe, catalog, classify." Kale crouched in front of her, meeting her gaze. "But you did more." "I didn't mean to." Her voice was barely audible. "You were not what I expected. You're not primitive. You're passionate. You're unpredictable. You're confusing." He chuckled. "We're basically chaos with a heartbeat." Jara's lips curled, just slightly. "It was supposed to be sterile, but I felt things." Kale's heart beat harder. "You mean yesterday, when we danced?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "No, before that. When you held me. When you called me safe." Kale stared at her, stunned by the honesty of it. "Jara, if they come for you, they'll take me," she said simply. "And reset me. Clean my memories. Reassign me." He reached for her hand. "No, I won't let that happen." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then she turned her hand and laced her fingers through his. It felt like a contract. Outside, the wind was picking up again, a new storm brewing. But inside the outpost, Kyle and Jara sat close, wrapped in silence and rising tension. They didn't know what would happen when the extraction ship landed, but one thing was clear now. This wasn't a mission anymore, it was personal, and neither of them was ready to let go. Not yet. Not ever. The ship broke through the clouds like a dagger through silk. Kale stood just outside the research dome, wind tugging at his coat, watching the sleek, violet-hued vessel descend silently into the clearing just 50 meters from the outpost. It didn't roar like human dropships. It didn't rumble or hiss. It hummed like something alive and patient, something that didn't need to announce itself because it was always in control. Beside him, Jara stood motionless, her arms folded. Across her chest, the glow of her skin dimmed to almost nothing. She looked smaller than usual. Not physically. She was still tall, elegant, strange, but something in her posture was tighter, coiled. "They'll try to talk to me alone," she said. Kyle didn't look away from the ship. "That gonna be a problem?" "I don't know. Yet." The landing ramp opened with the smooth grace of a machine that had done this 1,000 times before. 3 figures stepped out, all Erickson, all tall, lean, skin like polished chrome. No emotion on their faces, no wasted movement. The one in the center wore a thin band across her temple, some kind of neural command interface. She walked like gravity bent around her. "Friend of yours?" Kale asked quietly. Jara didn't answer, but Kale felt her hand brush his as she stepped forward. The lead Erickson spoke first. voice crisp and low, like glass being gently cracked. Agent ZH-17, you have violated non-contact protocol. You were scheduled for return 30 hours ago. Explain. Kyle opened his mouth, but Jara held up a hand. My shuttle was damaged, my signal blocked, I was rescued. You initiated physical contact with the subject, the commander said coldly, flicking her eyes toward Kale like he was a broken tool. You engaged emotionally. You contaminated the research. Jara didn't flinch. The subject is not what we expected. He never is, the commander replied, almost bored. Kale took a step forward. Subject's name is Kale, by the way, not that any of you bothered to ask. Two of the Erickson soldiers raised their arms slightly, devices glowing faintly at their wrists. Jara immediately stepped in front of him. Stand down, she said sharply. He is under my protection. The commander arched one silvery brow. Your protection? Jara's voice didn't waver. Yes. The silence that followed was thick with implication. Then the commander nodded. Very well. We will assess you for deprogramming and realignment. Afterward, we will retrieve the human for quarantine and memory extraction. Kyle's stomach dropped. Excuse me, the hell you will. Kale, Jara warned, grabbing his arm. But he was already moving. He stepped between her and the commander, arms out. You touch me, you're gonna find out just how primitive humans can get. The soldiers took another step forward. Jara snapped something in her native tongue, sharp, commanding. The soldiers froze. I am still the lead observer of this region, she growled. I have full discretion until I am recalled by the council, not a retrieval team. You compromised yourself, the commander said. You are no longer capable of objective assessment. Jara's voice was soft now. Too soft. You're right. Kyle blinked. I made contact. I felt things. I questioned the mission. She stepped closer, her glow slowly returning, flickering faintly beneath her skin. I learned more in 3 days with this human than I did in 3 years of training. The commander tilted her head. And what exactly did you learn? Jara's eyes never left Kale. I learned that sometimes the things you're not supposed to feel are the only things worth feeling. Kale's heart slammed against his chest. The commander's expression darkened. That sounds dangerously close to affection. It is. A pause. Then everything happened at once. The soldiers raised their arms again, wrist weapons glowing. Kyle grabbed Jara and shoved her behind him. A blast shot past his ear and melted a hole in the metal wall of the outpost behind them. God damn it, he shouted, pulling the emergency flare pistol from his belt and firing blindly toward the soldiers. The flare shot wide, blinding bright, and hit the nearest Erickson's chest. It didn't do damage, but it distracted. That was enough. Jara moved like lightning. In one elegant motion, she lunged, twisted one of the soldier's arms, and drove the other into the dirt with a technique Kale didn't recognize but absolutely respected. Kale dropped to the ground beside the second soldier, ripping the wrist device free and tossing it into the trees. Only the commander remained. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed. You would abandon your post for a primitive male? Jara didn't hesitate. I would abandon my species before I let you erase what I've become. You were designed to observe, the commander said coldly, not to become anything. Jara's glow surged. Then your design was flawed. Cal stood beside her, panting, a long red scrape down his arm from a glancing shot. The commander took a slow step backward. The council will not accept this. Then they'll have to come down here and tell me that themselves, Kyle snapped. The commander gave Jara one last look. You're free, but you're alone now. Don't expect to return. Jara didn't blink. I'm not alone. The commander turned and walked back up the ramp. The ship lifted without another word, disappearing into the clouds as silently as it had come. Kyle didn't breathe until the humming faded completely. Then he turned to Jara. You didn't have to do that. She looked up at him. Yes, I did. You gave up everything. She stepped closer. Her fingers touched his chest, just over his heart. No, I chose something. And she kissed him. It wasn't hesitant this time. It wasn't scientific, or experimental, or even careful. It was fierce, solid, certain. Kyle responded without thinking, arms circling her waist, pulling her against him, as if something in his bones had been waiting for this exact moment. When they pulled apart, Kyle whispered, "What now?" Jara smiled, glow returning full force now, a warm, golden pulse across her collarbones and cheekbones. "Now," she said, "we stop surviving, and we start living." Kyle grinned. "With you? I think I can manage that." She took his hand, and, together, they walked back into the outpost, not as an alien and a human, not as an experiment and a subject, but as something entirely new. It turned out, living was harder than surviving. Survival had rules. You ate, you moved, you didn't die. Simple, cold, clean, but living was messy. Jara learned this 3 days after the Erickson extraction ship left orbit, when she accidentally set fire to Kale's stovetop trying to boil water. Kale didn't even yell. He just ran in barefoot, stomped out the flame with a half-burned towel and turned to her with soot on his forehead and a completely straight face. "So," he said, "you're not a fire elemental after all." Jara blinked. "I followed the instructions precisely. 2 minutes at max heat. The molecules should have aligned for boiling. Yeah, that's not how kettles work. They should." He grinned and wiped his hands on his pants. "Welcome to humanity. Nothing ever works the way it's supposed to." She stood there, wide-eyed and frustrated, streaks of heat still glowing across her arms. Then she said something that surprised even herself. "I hate how much I like being wrong around you." Kale blinked. Then very softly he said, "That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." After that, something shifted. The tension between them, that buzz of unspoken heat and half-measured glances, finally gave way to something real. Something gentle. They began to settle into a rhythm. Jara started helping with Kyle's research. Her observations were more precise than his sensors. She noticed the subharmonic shifts in the planet's crust hours before Kyle's quake monitor did. He started teasing her about showing off, and she started pretending not to understand sarcasm, though she clearly did. At night, they talked. She asked questions about everything. Why humans dream, why they cry, why they eat ice cream when they're sad. Kyle answered patiently, sometimes through laughter, sometimes with a quiet sadness he didn't know he carried until she asked about his father or why he never left the research stations. She listened like he was the most important experiment she'd ever studied, not because she wanted to fix him, but because she wanted to know him. And he was beginning to realize no one had ever really tried that before. One night, they sat on the observation deck under the cracked plexiglass dome, wrapped in a patched blanket, watching the stars swirl above. Jara leaned her head against Kale's shoulder. "This isn't logical," she said softly. "Nope," he replied, resting his chin lightly on her hair. "Not even a little. But it feels correct." He didn't say anything for a while. Just held her, let her breathe, let her be. Then she said it. "I've never made it before." Kale didn't react right away. He didn't flinch or shift, or crack a joke. He just let her words sit there between them. "I know," he said finally quietly. "You don't have to explain." "I want to." She pulled away just enough to look at him. Her glow had returned, but this time it was slow pulsing, not from heat but from something deeper. Trust, vulnerability. "My people, our version of mating is clinical, controlled. We blend genetic material in stasis. There is no touch, no intimacy, no bonding. Not like this." Kale's brow furrowed. "So, no kissing? No closeness?" She shook her head slowly. "No need." He let out a breath. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard." Jara tilted her head. "Why?" Kale took her hand, interlaced their fingers. "Because this," he raised their joined hands, "isn't just about genes. It's about choosing someone, about wanting someone. Not just for what they are, but for who they are. Her throat moved. I think I want that with you. Kyle's voice was low. You sure? Jara nodded slowly, her skin pulsing like golden fire beneath her silver. My people say humans are dangerous, wild, addictive. That intimacy with you can override neural patterns, reshape instinct. And do you believe that? I do now. Kale leaned forward, gently. No rush, no pressure. Their lips met, tentative at first, then firmer, deeper. She responded like she was learning a new language through instinct alone. Her hands trembled as they moved across his chest, not from fear, from wonder. When they finally broke apart, she pressed her forehead against his. I don't want to reset, she whispered. I don't want to go back to the cold. I want to stay warm. Kale held her tight. Then stay with me, we'll figure the rest out. And that night, in the tiny outpost wrapped in silence and starlight, Jara learned what her people never taught her. What it meant to be wanted. What it meant to be chosen. What it meant to be touched. Not for data, but for love. Not everything made sense, but for once it didn't have to. Because for the first time in her life, Jara wasn't a researcher, a protocol, or a mission. She was his. And he was hers. And somewhere in the dark, quiet wild of an unnamed planet, something entirely new was beginning to grow. 3 weeks after the night she chose to stay, Jara started waking up different. It began with small things. She no longer needed the thermal blanket. Her body, once constantly cold and regulated by artificial implants, now retained heat for hours after Kale held her. Her skin, always smooth and metallic, was growing warmer to the touch, with faint patterns that flickered along her spine when he whispered her name in the dark. And then there were the dreams her people didn't dream. At least not in images. But now every night Jara dreamed in color, wild, human color. Not just images, but feelings. Emotions too large for words. A storm of sensation she had no training for and didn't want to escape. She tried to explain this to Kale over breakfast one morning, seated at the repurposed lab table, barefoot in his oversized shirt, sipping lukewarm coffee she claimed still tasted like roasted bark and regret. I saw you, she said softly, tracing the rim of her cup with one glowing finger. In the dream, you were holding something small, wrapped in light. Kale paused mid-bite. Something small? She nodded. I think it was alive. His eyes locked on hers. Like a pet? Jara shook her head slowly. No, it looked like you, but it also looked like me. Kale's fork clattered onto the plate. There was a long pause. You think you're... I don't know, she interrupted, her voice uncertain for the first time. But my body is adapting at a cellular level. Kale ran a hand through his hair, his pulse suddenly loud in his ears. We didn't exactly plan for... Neither did evolution, she said softly, watching his face. But it adapts. Kale stood up and started pacing. Not because he was angry, not because he was afraid, but because the idea of Jara carrying something that was part of him made his head spin like he'd been pulled into low orbit. You're saying... He turned to her, breath catching. You might be pregnant. Jara blinked. That's your word. My people call it first-phase fusion. It is not common. It usually requires synthetic stimuli, and certainly not interspecies. But your body's doing it naturally. It shouldn't be able to, she whispered. But something about your biology, it's like my cells are responding to it, like you've recoded me, from the inside out. Kale sat back down, slowly, carefully, like gravity had gotten heavier. And then he laughed. Not because it was funny, not because he didn't take it seriously, but because, of course, humanity would do this, Jara, he said, shaking his head. You're telling me that out of all the advanced species in the galaxy, humans are the only ones who can knock up a xenobiologist by accident. She looked puzzled. Knock up? He waved a hand. It's a human phrase. Translation: congratulations. You might have just created the universe's first hybrid love child without a user manual. Jara's glow flickered with something like nervous amusement. Is this bad? Kyle looked at her. Really looked. Her eyes, wide and uncertain. Her lips, slightly parted. Her body, beautiful, alien, brilliant, and possibly now carrying something impossible. And somehow, he wasn't scared. No, he said softly. It's not bad. It's insane. But it's not bad. Jara exhaled. I wasn't supposed to become anything. Kale reached for her hand. But you did, and maybe that's the best part. She hesitated, then let her fingers twine through his. Later that day, she ran a full scan of her body using Kale's medical pod. The results were inconclusive. Her system was doing things no machine was calibrated to measure. Her immune response had shifted. Her hormonal levels had surged into a pattern never recorded by Erickson biology. One thing was clear. Her body had changed, was still changing. When she stepped out of the scanner, Kyle was waiting, silent but steady. She walked up to him, barefoot, on the cold floor and placed his hand flat against her stomach. I don't know if this means anything, she whispered. Kyle looked into her eyes. It means everything. They didn't say parents. They didn't say baby. Not yet. But something new had taken root between them. A bridge across the stars. A defiance of biology and expectation in species. Something that didn't belong to science or protocol. Only to them. That night, Kyle held her close in the dark, her back pressed to his chest, her glow pulsing gently against his skin. His arm rested protectively over her waist, and for the first time in years, he didn't dream of being alone. Jara was already half asleep when she whispered, Kyle, if it's real, if it grows, I'll be here, he murmured. You don't know what it'll be? He kissed her shoulder. Doesn't matter. I already know what you are, and that's enough. She smiled in the dark. It was the first time she'd ever felt safe being uncertain. And maybe, just maybe, that was what being human meant all along. Weeks passed, then months. The planet bloomed with a slow, stubborn kind of life. The seasons shifted, the storms softened, and Kale's lonely outpost, once silent and utilitarian, began to feel like something else entirely. A home. Jara moved through it like she belonged there now. She had replaced half the systems with her own modifications, built new environmental sensors, and rerouted the power grid through a geothermal converter that Kale didn't even pretend to understand. She cooked with him, slept beside him, argued about gravity math, kissed him at strange intervals, and whispered things to his skin that had no translation but needed none. And slowly, beneath the hum of machines and warmth of firelight, she changed. Not just her body, though that too was undeniable. Her glow had deepened, richer and warmer, not just from proximity, but from something internal. Life, perhaps. Something new. Her curves softened, her pulse harmonized with his, and her breath would sometimes hitch at night, not from pain, but from the quiet awe of becoming. The scans confirmed it finally, with no room for debate. Jara was pregnant, truly, fully. And the child inside her was something entirely unprecedented. Human, Erickson, both. She stood in the middle of the outpost dome one night, bathed in starlight, Kale's coat draped over her shoulders. Her fingers curled protectively over her abdomen, where something tiny but powerful had taken root. Kyle watched her from the doorway, barefoot and stunned, like every time he looked at her was the first. You okay? He asked softly. She didn't turn. I don't know what it'll look like. Neither do I, Kyle said, stepping forward. But it's already the best thing I've ever helped make. She turned to him, eyes glowing with something he'd never seen before. Not fear, not pride. Something deeper. Something human. Love. "Do you think they'll come back?" she asked. Kyle didn't need to ask who they was. The Erickson wouldn't ignore this forever. Word would spread. The child growing inside her represented a biological impossibility, an evolution neither side of the galaxy was ready for. But Kale had already made peace with one truth. He would burn the sky before letting them take her. Or their child. "If they come," he said, "they'll have to go through me first." She stepped into his arms and rested her head against his chest. Her voice was barely a whisper. "They won't win." "No," he agreed, "because we've already got something they'll never understand." She tilted her head. "What's that?" Kyle smiled. "A reason to fight." And they did fight. It happened near the end of the 3rd month. The second Erickson ship arrived. At night, this one darker, sleeker, colder. Not a retrieval team, a containment squad. The kind sent to erase anomalies. But Kale had learned more than a few things about defense in his time out here. And Jara? She had learned how to feel, how to burn. Together they weren't just dangerous. They were unstoppable. The ship didn't last 15 minutes. Kale rigged the power cells. Jara overrode their neural net. When the smoke cleared and the ground shook no more, they stood side by side in the ruins of the landing site. Bruised, breathless, alive, victorious. Jara didn't ask Kale if he was sure anymore, she knew. And Kale didn't dream about running anymore, he dreamed about fireflies. About warm skin and soft light. About a future he'd never thought possible. They buried the broken pieces of the ship in the northern ravine and erased the signal traces. They changed the outpost's frequency. And then, together, they built a nursery from scraps and steel and warmth. The crib was a repurposed containment pod. The mobile above it was made of asteroid fragments Jara had collected during their first walk together. And when the day came, after hours of breath and pain and shivering joy, Kyle held the small, glowing, perfect child in his arms and felt something snap quietly into place inside his chest. A missing piece he never knew he'd lost. Jara watched him from the cot, her glow faint now, exhausted but at peace. "What should we name them?" she asked. Kale looked down at the little being, silver-skinned, soft-eyed, glowing faintly in his arms like hope itself. He smiled. "How about Nova?" Jara smiled, tears in her eyes. "Starborn." "Like her mom," he said, kissing Jara's forehead. Outside, the storms had calmed. The stars blinked silently overhead, unaware, or maybe watching, as something impossible thrived. Quietly in the wild, a human, an alien, a child, a family, the first of their kind, but not, Kale knew, the last. Not anymore, because they had each other. And that was more than survival. It was life. It was love. And it was only just beginning. The end.